Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got Richard Reid from South Africa, and he is a leadership coach, behavioral psychologist. He's a consultant and keynote speaker. He is the author of Charisma Unlocked, and I'm really happy to have him on to discuss his work with leadership coaching. And just FYI, they're lawnmowers, but we'll do our best to minimize disruption. So, Richard, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Briefly introduce yourself and talk about how you got started and what you're currently doing.
Sure. I've been doing what I do for about 20 years. I started off as a psychotherapist and then really evolved into being a business coach and an organizational psychologist. And I really fell into it by chance. I started off after university working in IT and absolutely hated it. The only bit of it I really enjoyed was the bit where I'm translating from the techies to the end users. So I always knew the from Wales. Oh, it's this stopped. Oh, it's come back again. I met a psychiatrist from Wales, told him a little bit about my frustrations, that I was looking to do something different. And he said, have you ever thought about being a psychotherapist? So when I got back from that trip, I started reading up on it, started doing some courses, and it really snowballed from there. And as a psychotherapist, I work with all kinds of things. So it's from serious mental health issues, post-traumatic stress, all the way through to more involved things like organizational change, leadership coaching, being a CEO confidant, lots of things like that. And then obviously there's the charisma element as well. The charisma for me is a neat way of packaging a lot of things that I've seen in therapy and coaching, things around confidence, things around communication, things around connection. And it's really gathered strength from there, really.
Yeah, so very interesting journey. And I know, first thing when clients come to you, because this is a business entrepreneurship podcast and we showcase people that are brands and businesses. So when people come to you, what is their number one problem or pain point that they're looking to solve?
So it could be a number of different things, but I guess quite often it's about connection, how they connect with people, how they're seen by people, misunderstandings with people. And sometimes it comes because actually people aren't in connection with what they're really thinking or feeling, or not comfortable sharing their true selves. And lots of people, even very accomplished people, show themselves the parts of themselves that they think people will find socially acceptable. So quite often, even with very accomplished people, you get what we call imposter syndrome. So people in a role, doing very well, but always waiting for that tap on the shoulder that says, you don't belong here. So really common.
Yeah. And so diving into the questions, what is your approach to helping clients solve these problems? I know you've written a book. It looks like you have live events as well. And you also give a lot of keynotes. What is your system or process for helping clients solve these problems and become more effective?
So a lot of people think it's about the external behaviors, how you manifest it in the outside world. And it absolutely is, but it starts with how you manage your internal world. So if you don't know what you're experiencing, you don't know what you're giving out to people, then actually you can have all the skills and the techniques in the world, but it's only going to get you so far. So we start with getting people to look at their inner world, recognizing more minute to minute what they're feeling so they can register that, adapt if necessary. And also it then allows them to offset any difficult emotion. So actually you've got spare capacity to think about what's going on for other people. And I think this is really important as well. When we're thinking about things like charisma, it's not just about putting on a performance and looking wonderful. It's actually about how you connect with other people. If you don't recognize what's going on for other people, then you're going to objectify people. You're going to talk at people. You're not going to adapt your message to suit the audience. And that tends to happen more when our bucket's full, when we're full of emotion and we're not dealing with it effectively.
Yeah, really fascinating. And so I want to dive into this idea of charisma and the science and strategy to captivate, influence, and succeed. And quite often I hear the term or adjective, he or she has charisma, very charismatic. You see it in they said JFK was very charismatic. But then you talk about it's not just about having charisma, it's about what you do with charisma. And so talk about your strategy or framework of how you harness charisma, because obviously you have this raw, or how do you hone it to science and a skill?
Yeah, so I guess it's worth saying, but my view is that everybody has the ability to be charismatic, and certainly some people are born with more obvious charisma than others, but all of us can adapt And it's about celebrating your uniqueness. It's not about being perfect. It's about being who you are and owning that. And absolutely, you can polish the edges of that. But it's fundamentally working with who you are. So it's authentic. So a big part of it is about how you then harness that. And I guess we tend to think about charisma as being about extroverts, people who are very entertaining, they hold the room. And there are those people. But for me, charisma is more than that. Charisma is also about creating virtuous circles. So in other words, it's not just about making me look wonderful. It's about how I'm elevating other people as well. The way that we do that is to create psychological safety in conversation. So actually people open up to us, we can understand them better, we can make them feel validated. And as a consequence, we can align our messages more, albeit authentically, with what's relevant for them. So recognizing their hopes, their fears, interests. And so hopefully you get more win-win situations. And for me, that's really what charisma needs to be about. It's about creating win-win situations. It's not about just charming people to get what we need in that moment and then forgetting about them. It's about promoting more community. It's about getting people to come away from experiences of meeting us and feeling good about themselves, not just good about us.
Yeah, really interesting. And I know we have some connection issues, the video quality and streaming and audio, but just bear with us. We apologize to the audience. And a follow-up question I have for you is because you mentioned this idea of leadership, and it's not just today's day, especially a lot of what was really interesting as I read an article where people, they don't want to, like, one of the business owners was complaining to me that employees, they don't want to work, and I obviously see why, because it's one-sided. CEOs and leaders and politicians have no accountability, and they're able to basically, it's just, so how do you address this idea of accountability and this one-sidedness in leadership today with your clients?
Yeah, so within a business, that obviously businesses are there to make money, and that's always going to be the priority. And in any job, there are going to be elements that people don't want to do, but they need to be done. But I think the more that we understand the people that we work with, the more that they see that we recognize them as individuals, then actually people have more loyalty, people feel more engaged. And I think one of the biggest challenges I find is that even in this stage, a lot of leaders feel that they've got to be perfect. They've got to appear to be the smartest person in the room. They can't have any fallibilities or anything like that. And I think one of the biggest things that leaders can do if they want people to feel more connected and more engaged is to demonstrate humility. So yeah, to have got to that point, they've got to be pretty accomplished, but actually sometimes acknowledging when you don't know the answer, opening the floor up to the people. Even maybe when you do think you know what needs to be done, just considering other people's positions so you can adapt your message to take into account what they've said makes people feel that actually they're being acknowledged and validated. And sometimes holding back. It's very common that leaders will immediately dive in when there's a question to be answered, sometimes holding back and giving other people an opportunity or inviting particular people to share a viewpoint. It raises everybody. And then the risk is that when we don't do that, we create echo chambers. People start to switch off, feel they can't say what they really think. And we've seen this in politics and in businesses, that people then go off in all kinds of weird and wonderful directions because there's nobody to challenge them or to present them with an alternative viewpoint. So humility is massively important. And even talking about mistakes that we've experienced, difficulties we've been through, it normalizes things. It levels the playing field and makes other people more willing to speak up when they disagree or they don't understand. And again, that saves problems further down the line.
And also, what's interesting is this idea of charisma, and you offer compelling insights and real world examples. And you talk about subtle shifts in communication and body language that can transform the way people respond to you. What are some just very eagle eye, broad, how subtle shifts in communication or body language, such as examples that can illustrate this idea?
So very simple things. One of the most obvious things, it's so obvious we don't tend to think about too much, is our breathing. A lot of the time, particularly in this day and age, going between back-to-back online meetings, we're rushing. And often there are emotions at play in conversations as well. And all of those things play into our breathing. And so being more self-aware gives you an opportunity to manage your breathing. So number one, you have more agility in that conversation. But number two, it then plays out in the movement of your body and how you project your voice. So it has a massive bearing. And what you'll often find is when people get emotionally agitated, so either they get very excited or very threatened, then they either overextend their body or they make themselves smaller, they lean in. So again, subtle shifts in those forms, be aware when that's happening, allows us just to manage those emotions. There's lots of work that research has been done on this by Amy Cuddy, for example. So subtle shifts like that can be really useful. They can also start to inform somebody else's body language, emotions, and thinking patterns as well. Yeah. So brains mirror brains. So if we are matching somebody's body language and gradually over the course of that conversation, just subtly shifting it, it also starts to bring people out of a position that might be unhelpful to the conversation. So those are some obvious things that we can do, but also how we structure our conversations is important, because a lot of the time when we are threatened by something, when we have a different view, when we assume we know what somebody's going to say and we're not going to agree with it, we want to get in first. We want to be the first person to speak. And that's natural. But when we do that, it immediately triggers what's called system one of the brain for the other person. In other words, they register that and they think, hang on, you're trying to power over me here. And people start to talk over each other. So learning to manage those impulses, and breathing is one of the ways in which we can do that, because it provides a pause. It means that we can open the conversation, but then let the other person speak. And even if ultimately we disagree with them and present a different viewpoint, we're affording them respect. And we're actually creating what we call a pattern interrupts. We're not doing what their system one brain expects. We're not shutting them down. So tell me more. I want to find out more. Tell me more. When you said that, what did you mean? So they start to relax. And then they are shifting into hopefully what we call system two of the brain, which is more receptive to what we say. And they will consider things rather than immediately going to that default, no, don't agree. This is what I think. So that's the mistake people make. They dive in. They're too quick. They're too quick in what they say too much. They don't manage their breathing. And all of that feeds into how they come across to the other person. So hopefully you can see even within that opening gambit of a conversation, it can have wide-reaching repercussions.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because, especially as I've had my fair share, and I really love this idea of coming back to your breath. This, like, for a great example is like right now we're like technology, we're communicating through camera and internet, and sometimes you have a lag, and then sometimes it can be misconstrued as just, like I said, you have this dynamic where people are talking over each other, and it can be very counterproductive. So how do you adjust your body language and communication with technology?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, and this is always important in any scenario, but particularly when we're working online, the transitions between different calls are often very brief. And so you often get what we call emotional leakage. In other words, you're taking emotions from one experience into the next situation, whether they're helpful or not. And that spills over. It spills over in terms of how we speak, how we move our body, all these kinds of things. So I think even if you've only got 30 seconds between meetings, again, registering your emotions, even if you can't offset them in those 30 seconds, allows you to be a little bit more cautionary in your next meeting. And one of the things that we don't tend to do is we don't tend to think about our intention. We think about, this is what I want to say, this is what I want to get out of the meeting. We don't think about the emotions that go with that. In other words, how do I want this person to feel in order to create the opening that I want, or in order to go away and act on what it is that I need? So thinking about the emotion is really important. And even more so in this kind of environment, or when we're on the telephone, because people don't have the full view of who we are. So we have to work harder. So that's the first thing that I'm saying, set your intention. And that's almost like your North Star. A lot of things will automatically fall into place just by having set that intention. But I think the other thing to think about is sentences. So a lot of the time we use quite long sentences with lots of subclauses, and shorter sentences are great, particularly if you're giving a formal talk or speech. But they're also really useful on video calls as well, because there are time lags. We can't read people's body language as well. So actually we don't know whether our messages are landing or not. So those shorter sentences, they're valuable for a number of reasons. They allow us to not only check in with somebody, are they understanding? Are they interested? Do I need to double down on that? Do I need to spend a bit more time on this, move on quicker? But it also allows us to engage our audience. Did that make sense? Any thoughts on that? An hour on a video call is a lot longer than an hour in person. So we have to work that bit harder. And those shorter sentences also allow us to bring more emphasis into those sentences. In other words, to think about how we can be more purposeful. How are the words adding value? How is my particular voice tone and pace adding value? How are my hands and my face adding value? And ideally, what we want to be doing over a period of time is getting more deliberate and streamlined and purposeful with everything that we're bringing to our communication. And that's always going to be a work in progress, but that's the aim.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And I know we have around 2, 3 minutes left. And what's interesting is how does charisma differ in person versus online? And you touched upon that. I want to talk to you about you have this neuro agility protocol and talk to the audience what that is and how it can empower individuals to overcome challenges, optimize decision making, and the distinct stages. And lastly, how can people connect with you and find out more about you and learn from you?
Sure. So maybe I'll answer that bit first of all. If anybody wants to find out more or get in touch, then you can go to my website, which is www.richard-reid.com. Reid spelled R-E-I-D. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Richard-Reid. In terms of the neuroagility protocol, it's really the culmination of about 20 years of research and work in the field. And again, one of the things that lots of sort of business people come to me about is things like decision making, and they have to make lots of decisions, and often they have to make decisions under pressure, lots riding on it, and very short periods in which to make those decisions. And again, going back to what we were saying before, this is often when system one kicks in. So system one kicks in, we act on impulse, and we act on our default ways of thinking that sometimes are helpful, but sometimes actually are counterproductive. So the neuroagility protocol is really about getting people to become more aware of what's happening. And we use feedback for that. We've got sensors that we use. We've got various sort of questionnaires and tests we do with people. And it really gives them a sort of a psychological profile that gets them to recognize their strengths and their weaknesses. And then based upon that, we then use lots of sort of practical skills to train them how to then behave differently depending on the situation. And you can teach people things in a short period of time, but really the true value of it comes from the fact that it's done over a 6 to 12 month period. So actually, all the time, what you're doing is you are feeding back on how those things are working out, how they're being implemented within real life situations. So you're fine tuning it all the time. And the repetition of doing that helps people to create new neural pathways that then mean that those alternative, more helpful behaviors become more instinctive.
Excellent. I really enjoyed this talk about charisma and especially the particular challenges and especially with technology. And I encourage the audience to check out Richard's book. It's on Amazon, and check out his website, connect with him on LinkedIn. And again, thanks so much for coming on and a fantastic conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you.